Hey everybody, welcome to Fresh Out the Box. Does an interview here with Clinton Boomer. I am the Game Master Extraordinaire and Board Game Guru, Jahan.
I am the co-host Casualty CDG, and I am happy to be here. I'm a retired child crimes and human trafficking detective turned tabletop titan and improv comedian.
I'm Clinton J. Boomer, ostensibly a game designer, and also just a guy, a dad. That's mostly what I do these days, and a lot of dadding. And can y'all see and hear me?
Yeah.
With some quality.
Hmm?
I'm not going for max quality.
No, it's pretty good.
Oh, good. Because I mean, you know, for this voice, you don't need max quality. But we'll get by. Well, awesome, coolio.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start off. Tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you worked on, things that you've done. We'll kind of start there.
Actually, he has a really cool origin story from what I've read. Clinton, tell me if I'm wrong. In 2008, didn't you win some sort of "Now I'm a Badass and Work for Paizo" competition? And who were you before that? Who were you? How did that change your life? Did it change your life?
That's really cool.
Okay, so short answer, yes. Long answer, it's even weirder. It's even weirder than that. But yeah, absolutely. That is if you're like, oh yeah, he's from Krypton, but it blew up and then he came to Earth. You're like, yeah, that's absolutely accurate. But what made it weirder? He was a baby. Okay, so broad strokes, absolutely correct. Sorry, I'm gonna stand up here. I'm gonna close my bedroom door, not for any particularly good reason. But my son was just dashing by and I waved. He's just a cool guy. I want to be able to wave back at him. Oh yeah. Long story short, yeah, I did a. Never apologize. You're awesome. Yeah.
I'm really strong.
You're incredibly strong. Strongest possible agreement with that. All right. And I'm gonna have you close this door, and I love you. Enjoy your show, big guy.
Go on. I'm going to get back by water.
Damn, now I'm so interested. I just want to be like, what's he watching? Let's go inside. Let's sit down.
I also want to know what he's watching.
I love it. Okay. To keep you informed, he's super into. It's on Netflix. It's called Miraculous: Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir. Are you familiar?
No.
I was going to say, at least it sounds like he's consuming fantasy fuel at a young age.
Oh, it's amazing. He really. I don't want to say anything. If you were, if you were hoping, or man, I really hope I get a dad who's who you could turn to and be like, Dad, tell me everything about the character of Black Cat from Spider-Man. You just like to turn and be like, son, I've waited my entire life for this. Thank you. You done. There's so many things I can't do for you, but I absolutely okay. Sit down, shut up. Right? It's a good system. yeah. Miraculous. It's a French show, and it's very French. Like, oui, very French. And it all takes place in Paris. And the main character is a girl named Marinette, and she gets a magical medallion that turns her into the crime-fighting superhero Ladybug. And then she's desperately in love with this one random guy who goes to her school. His name is Adrian, and he has another magical talisman that it turns him into Cat Noir. What's funny is Cat Noir is desperately in love with Ladybug, and is like constantly trying to woo her. And of course, and the Ladybug's like, oh, this guy's a joker. Like, what? Like, this guy's a tool. Like, he's basically the Robin to her, Batman. And he's like, oh, Ladybug, and her like, thanks, Cat Noir, whatever, because she's in love with Adrian. And of course, they don't know, and it's so fun in every episode.
The age-old story.
Absolutely, and of course, then the supervillain Hawkmoth. Every episode he gives superpowers to some random citizen of Paris. And they try to kill Ladybug and Cat Noir. I mean, they did like 12 seasons of this. It's fantastic. It turns out he's Adrian's dad, and he has no idea that his son is Cat Noir. And like Cat Noir has like no idea that his dad is like basically like Lex Luthor. It's so good. Like half Lex Luthor, half Dr. Doom. It's so good. It's a fantastic show. It has my
Sounds pretty great.
Strongest, yeah, as high as possible recommendation. My 7-year-old, like, when he came to me, he's like, I want to wear a Ladybug costume. I'm like, oh, you want to be Cat Noir? He's like, no, I want to be Ladybug. I was like, awesome. Like, that you gotta do a good job telling the story for like the first thing he said to you was, I just want you to know I'm pretty strong. For him to be like, yes, Ladybug is the best character. Like, not Cat Noir, not anyway. So, long story short. Oh, so. Look it up. It's on Netflix. I don't get any money for it.
I actually already looked it up and looked at it, and yeah, I saw.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I accidentally played a little bit of the theme song on the stream.
Put to the test when things go wrong. Miraculous.
Are you sure you don't get for this?
It's very like you can tell it was a bunch of French people who like watched a lot of anime, and then were like, also American superheroes are fine. Anyway. What's my point? La la la. Oh, so I did this to loop back. Back in like 2007, I found out about this thing that Paizo was doing on the internet called RPG Superstar. Awesome. And I mean, they could have called it like "Who Wants to Be an RPG Superstar?" Like "Who Wants to La La." But like, that's basically what it was. It was this like kind of "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire" / so you think you can dance, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is great. And like, it was a cool idea, and they didn't say it at the time, but they made it very clear. Like once we really got into it, they're like, because this is 2007. That Paizo at the time was best known as the publishers of Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, which was awesome. And I loved Dragon, I loved Dungeon, and I've sat down. I've got to have a drink with. She doesn't tell this story, but I do. She's not bragging like, oh my god, I met Boomer. Like, no, she doesn't care. But like, no, I mean, like, what? But Lisa Stevens, who is just, I mean, you walk into a room full of smart people, and she's still the smartest one in the room. You're just like, oh Jesus! Like, if you go to the store right now and pick up a pack of like Magic the Gathering, like pick up a pack of the cards and like take it home and like open it up and like get out the little sheet where it's like how to play, like how do you Magic the Gathering. They have a thing like at the bottom where it's like created by Dr. Richard Garfield, blah blah blah. Her name is still on there. Like, it's still so, like, to this day, it has the, like, and special thanks to Lisa Stevens. Like, she has been such a huge part of, like, the games industry. Yeah. Like, I remember her, like, one of her stories, like, she has one of her funny stories. She's like, so anyway, I was there in a car, and I was, driving to Gen Con, and it's just a bunch of people, and we're hanging out, and Mark Reinhagen turns to me, and he's like, I think you could do a cool game. Like, in Dungeons & Dragons, you can play as Conan the Barbarian, and you can play as Gandalf the Grey. But how would you run a game if you wanted to play, I don't know, Lestat from Interview with a Vampire? She was like, yeah, it's not a bad idea, Mark Reinhagen. It comes off as the Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. Where you're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, John Lennon. Maybe you should, but it's true. Like that's why Lisa Stevens is amazing. Where she's like, okay, cool. Like let's just workshop the concept of Vampire the Masquerade. Like la la la. She's just been there. like
Yeah.
as part of the industry. Like she's part of our history and our culture. And she was working, to my understanding, and there's a chance that Lisa Stevens herself is going to be like, Boomer, oh my God, you haven't listened to a word I've said. But to my understanding, she was working at what was TSR, then became Wizards of the Coast, when Wizards of the Coast like purchased TSR and were like, oh man, we want to do a 3rd edition of the world's greatest role-playing game. And they were like doing this big transition, and like, here's 3rd edition is on the way, and that Lisa, who'd like been there when they like decided to release Pokemon, like Lisa was one of the people in the room being like, yeah, pocket monsters, like, yeah, I think Americans would like that. Anyway, she at one point was like, hey, are you guys going to keep doing Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine? Because those have been around since the 70s, since it was the Dragon.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, and basically the nice people at Wizards of the Coast were like, no. Like, yeah, that's not we're trying to, let me be clear, we're trying to reinvent everything from scratch. Like 2nd edition into 3rd.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that 2007, 2008, that age period was right as 4th edition was being developed and released. Is that
ding. So Lisa, who's a genius, to clarify, that's the point of the story. She was like, oh, well, would you be willing to sell me or rent me the licensing rights to Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine? I'll do it. And, I'll obviously pay you, whatever it is you need. But like, yeah, basically I'm just going to start my own publishing company. How hard can that be? And then for like 8 years, put out, Dragon, Dungeon, and then Polyhedron, because that was packaged with Dungeon for a long time. We were just like, sounds good to me. I believe in you. He thinks his water's frozen enough. We're going to find out here pretty quick. But yeah, basically, just start basically create an entire in-house team to do Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine simultaneous with the release of 3rd edition. And God love her, she did it. I mean, like, she aced it. They moved from 3.0 into 3.5 and la. And some of that stuff's legendary. Oh, and by the way, while they did that, they invented the concept of the adventure path with stuff like Shackled City. And you just kind of go, oh, God. Basically, at the end of the 3.5 era, the nice people as Wizards of the Coast, who at this point, at some point or another had become a subsidiary of Hasbro, or part of Hasbro. They basically, to my understanding, came to Lisa Stevens and were like, hey, we're no longer interested in licensing Dragon and or Dungeon to you, and in fact, we're not going to be we don't want to be in the I love it, you're a good man, you got his water. We don't want to be in the magazine publishing business at all, and we also don't want you to be. So we're just going to take those back, or basically stop renting them to you. We're going to make Dragon and Dungeon fully online. That's all going to be online stuff. And we're moving into the 4th edition, and here's all our information, so you kind of get to choose what Paizo does next. And again, to my understanding, and then I may get emails about this, but to my understanding, Lisa Stevens sat down with a lot of her team, who are all fantastic people. Wesley Schneider, one of my favorite human beings who's ever lived. Just James Jacobs, and we'll just go down the list. They could probably name every person who's worked there. It's just fantastic. And they were like, what are we gonna do? Do we jump to 4th edition? And there was as far as I understand, Jason Bowman and Lala kind of went, you know what? I feel like we should keep doing 3.5 material. I feel really confident about it. I feel really good about it. What are the rules? We can't call it Dragon. We can't call it Dungeon. We can't call it Dungeons and Dragons. But it was all released under the OGL. We have an in-house stable of writers and artists. We have this list of people we've been sending magazines to. I feel like we could just create our own role-playing game. What do you guys think? And everybody's like, yeah, bro, let's do it. Let's do it. And so when I found out about this, it was in Dragon Magazine or Dungeon Magazine or something online. They weren't saying it, but they were kind of doing we're gonna need some more people. like we're about to launch Pathfinder, but like all the design work I did at the time was like, here is everything that is 3.0/350 GL. This is it. This is everything. And remember, that's not everything, right? It's like the Monstrous Manual, but not the Illithid. Not Monstrous Manual 2, not Monstrous Manual 3. The Player's Handbook, but not Player's Handbook 2. Some parts of the DMG, but not the Wealth by Level scale for whatever reason. They're not Umber Hulk. Like every time you're flipping through, like, oh man, I really want to use the Displacer Beast. That's not legal. I can't use Displacer Beast. Outstanding. What about a Cloak of Displacement on a Bergheist? Legal? Outstanding. Thank you. I'll do that immediately. Like it became this really weird challenge. But yeah, that's so yeah. What they did is
it's really weird because as a non, I guess, tabletop role playing game fan, you wouldn't even know what monsters you were or weren't allowed to use. There are probably a lot that Wizards owns that you would have no idea as a regular tabletop fan.
It is weird. I mean, like up to a point, you can wrap your brain around it. Where you go, how willing is a lawyer, like any lawyer, how willing are they to like? I'm going to walk into a courtroom. I'm going to look a judge in your eye, and say, Your Honor, we own Goblin. Like the concept, like the abstract of Goblin to Goblin eyes. In fact, we're about to sue Stan Lee's estate for use of the Green Goblin. Like I was hoping to get to fist fight him in the parking lot, but unfortunately he died. Like how willing are you to do that? And so there is stuff on the list where you're like, dude, nobody owns Red Dragons. You know, like Red Dragons, like they're just in the thing. But like some of the monsters, like the Beholder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty classic.
I can see that argument where behold this the eye sphere and with his tendrils, and you go, what would you call that? And you're like, I think I think you guys invented that, you created it, or on that.
I think Mind Flayers is one of theirs too, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they have Mind Flayers and Beholders, and I think Mimics too.
Not Mimics.
No,
I know that for one reason.
That's excellent.
I know this is all right. There's a bit like Umber Hulk. You're like, the Umber Hulk, and you're like, yes, it is a Hulk that has been Umberized. It is copyrighted Wizards of the Coast.
That's a weird one.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, cool. Displacer Beast. It's like, okay, it's a beast, but like, can I say Beast of Displacement? And they're like, how excited are you to hear from Hasbro's lawyers? Like, very excited. I'll change it. The reason I know Mimic, and I will say this, at one point, my first paying gig in the industry, because what I did is, like many others, like many will enter, someone will win. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. A bunch of people. The idea was you had to send in a magic item. Using the rules for 3.5, the Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 edition, send in a magic item. It has a word count. Like here's how many words it can be, and then they have all these notes. They're like, we want a wondrous item, so not a magic sword. That is its own thing. That's under arms and armor. So not a magic shield. Boots, magic boots would work. Magic a cloak. So not a rod, not a staff, not a wand, not a ring, because these are all types. Not a potion, right? And on. And I have to wonder, because I honestly don't know, I have to wonder how much of the challenge for the judges was literally just going through and being like, well, this is a unique sword. It's a magic item, but it's this is the sword of ass beatery. And you're like, no. We're looking for wondrous items. I'm looking for cloak of protection. Right? Cloak of resistance, ring of protection. Some stuff is named. Right.
I think I had a wondrous item one time that was a rowboat that then turned into a medium-sized ship and then into a large-sized ship when you spoke the word of power. And so that to me is
the boat in a box. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a wondrous item to me, not just a sort of, like you said, ass kickery.
I had a feather that turned into a rowboat as well. That was a good one.
Yes, yeah, the Qual's feather tokens, and they're all super weird. We're just like, this one's a pre-feather token. Is the tree planted in the ground? You're like, you expect a floating tree? How is that more weird? And I apologize, it's magic. Thank you.
What was it, Jahan? The robe of many things that you had with the patches that you ripped off?
Oh, I loved the robe of many things. That's one of my favorite magic items I've ever had.
Wondrous items, right? That's really wondrous to me.
Oh yeah. There are some awesome. Where you're just like, the iron cask. Where you're like, oh, what's this? You're like, well, it's kind of like iron flask. Where like it's kind of like the genie of the lamp, except it's an iron flask and it could have anything in there. Like, what about like just a guy named Steve? Absolutely, that he could be in there. Rub it and find out. You're like, how about a demon prince? You're like, who knows what's in the iron flask? Rub it and find out. Like, I refuse.
There's a demon prince named Steve in there.
Yeah, it's like those are fun. What's the Darren's Instant Fortress, which we can call just the Instant Fortress. We're like, here is a 6-inch by 6-inch by 6-inch cube with a big button on it. Press the button, and a 1,000-foot wide wall of iron appears in front of you that springs into and here's a fortress. You're like, oh, that. I'm glad I didn't have that pointed at anyone. I remember getting one of those and literally, they have the rules for what if you rip it into something's mouth. We're like, dragon's about to eat me, or Tarask, and you're like, beep, instant fortress inside your head. There are rules for it. It didn't kill the Tarask. I'm just going to tell you that.
Oh no,
Tarask is full of hate. Tarask is he's meaner than you expect him to be.
Did it make a fortress in the Tarask?
Oh, you did, yeah. I mean, the fortress begins to appear, and then the Tarask makes grunting sounds, and you're like, "Well, I just lost that magic item." How many hit points did you lose? Is it all of them? No. Okay.
I'm hoping when you kill it, if you kill it, however you kill it, when you go inside, your fortress is still there, and what a badass fortress indeed.
And it's just been crumpled like a. When you take a car, we're like, oh, how long has it been at the dump? It's been there a while. And you're like, that cube is. You're like, that's technically still a Miata.
Oh, I was just thinking, we live in the Tarask. You just go down there, make a right, go inside, and we have a nice place. We have a whole fortress in there.
Oh yeah. He goes everywhere. I mean, he goes anywhere the Tarask wants to go. So,
that's exactly right.
Yeah, we just got a beef jerky on a string. We have somebody walk outside.
Would you be interested in purchasing some of the timeshare of the fortress inside the Tarask?
I'd be down.
I would. There's somebody told me about a it's a I don't know if it's an adventure path or if it's just a city setting book. It's probably out now. I'm probably gonna say it and you're like, yes, Boomer, that is an established part of the universe in which we live. What are you, an idiot? But I remember at the time of hearing about it, it was a city called Salt in Wound. Like the city of Salt in Wound, like Salt-in Wound. And the idea was an entire fantasy metropolis built around the still regenerating, mostly dead corpse of the Tarask.
How nice.
Where you're just primary import, anything you can't get out of chopping off of the Tarask. Primary export, Tarask bits. And you're just what kind of natural resources you got? Well, they killed him in the middle of what's now a desert. I don't know what it used to be, but yeah, he's just twitching. He's real hateful, and what started off as a mages guild, just guys who just fling fireballs into the thing's skull every couple of minutes, and then we realized some of that meat's good eating. And I was like, what a charming, fun, quirky, I want to adventure there.
Yeah, that is fun.
Yeah, delightful. Long story short, so wondrous items. We were like, there are some really cool, the deck of many things, where you're just draw a card, your character's dead. Draw another card, oh, I'm a god. How many cards do you want to draw? All of them? Those are awesome wondrous items, and they're just just send us wondrous items. Here's the rules. You didn't follow the rules, and you added a short story to it because the deck of many things doesn't have a little short story attached to it. So into the circular file you go, and they whittled it down to 32. I apologize, 32 quote unquote finalists, and I was on that list, and then really cool, a bunch of because the three judges, it was the incredible Clark Peterson of Necromancer Games, who's just amazing. I mean, just to have that moment, you're like, wait, I could pay $100 and just like have you talk to me for an hour? Like, oh my god, like let's do this thing. It's Wolfgang Bauer, who of Kobold, like the Kobold of Kobold Press, Wolfgang Bauer, and then it's Eric Mona, who like editor in chief of Paizo, and you just go three absolutely brilliant men. Who some of them, like I believe it was Clark Peterson, was just like, hey everybody, did you submit an item and it didn't get picked as one of the final 32? Repost it here in this thread and I'll tell you kind of what I was thinking, like why I maybe didn't choose it. And you're like, who has the time or energy or power to do like the absolute balls to just be like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many entries were there? A couple thousand? I can answer that many questions. Like,
just gave him something to do every night for the next 2 years of his life, huh?
Yeah, you're like, oh my god, do you have a job? He's like, yeah, I'm a judge. I'm like, I'm sorry, a what? Yeah,
I got time.
A judge in a court of law?
Like in a court of law, it's like, yeah, a judge. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm aware, Your Honor, of the concept.
Yeah, I thought you were like a games competition judge, not a judge.
Well, I do both. And you're like, okay, I could, yeah, why, yeah. That's like a guy who's like, I'm a firefighter.
I judge everything.
Yeah, I'm a firefighter. I should also light my hands on fire and like fight people like in an MMA. That'd be great.
I'm also a firefighter. That's right.
Yeah. It's like it came to me in a dream, and you're like, okay, cool. Anyways, yeah, Clark Peterson, incredible guy. Of course, probably here in about 10 seconds here, but actually, I just looked it up. It was actually Wolfgang Bauer who did that. I'm like, shit, my bad. But they were incredibly approachable. They were just wonderful. They gave a ton of feedback, and basically the thing is like, hey, congratulations, the 32 of you. Now you get to do much more crazy stuff, and they just kind of did it like round by round. Where it's like, okay, we're going to whittle this down from 32 to 16. Submit a country.
Ooh.
Like, here's the number of words you're allowed to have. We would prefer, like, our preferred format would be something interesting about the country. Give me a little bit about the history. Give me about the economics, politics, sociology, psychology. Tell me about a couple of the like really interesting people who live there. Make sure it's a place that people would want to adventure. I mean, the Sword Coast North, is great, but like the Shire, maybe not as interesting. Like it's a great place to be from, So I mean, but you guys you're all game. You guys are basically all professional game designers. So yeah, just do it. Just so there it is, and you have like 600 words, and you're like, oh shit. So there's like a gazetteer entry. You're like, oh fuck me. Like the moment, like or even whatever the words was, whatever was like 3,000. You're like, need twice that. Like this is a setting, and like it's one country in a setting. Just go for it, like and you learn to hate the rules, and then to try to like weasel your way around them. And then every time, basically, people would submit. You had your deadline, submit, and then they're like, we don't choose who goes on to the next level. Like we, the 3 judges, will make our commentary. Like, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, and now here the floor is open. Here's the forum. Other people will get to make a comment as well. You, as a person who has submitted your work, may not comment. And you just go, oh God. And you watch it, you're like, this guy doesn't get it. Oh, this guy doesn't get it. Oh God, I gotta go. What do I do? And you're like, you want to be a professional game designer? You're like, not anymore. And then the contest is working. So yeah, it was wonderful. It was eye-opening. It was breathtakingly wonderful. And then they opened it to voting. So it was American Idol style, where they just go like, yeah, voting will be open between these 2 times. Get on, people vote, and then we'll announce, here's the top 16. Hey, congratulations, you made the top 16. Give us 3 monsters.
Excellent.
Oh, cool.
So at this time, were you had you already developed any games, written any games, anything, or was this kind of your first big hurrah?
This was 1,000% first my big hurrah. Now I have been gaming. Really, I'll be 42 this year. I was born in 1980, which makes the math very easy. Like it's very like, yeah, sweet, 1980. I feel bad for people. 1978 or like, God help you, 1983. Like,
88 right here.
88. God, how would you do that math in your head?
I just don't know how old I am. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm probably in my 20s. I don't fucking know. Like, yeah, that's. I feel like you just at some point. Whereas for me, I'm like, ding. It's the same as the Millennium, just plus 20. But like, so I started gaming in 1993. I was 13 years old, and Planescape came out. I don't know how old and sodded and grognardy you want to get, but in my opinion, Planescape was and is it is the best setting I've ever read. It was breathtaking. I have been so fortunate to get to work even in the shadow of other people who worked on Planescape. Planescape Torment, of course, is the game, the computer game.
Yeah.
That takes place in that setting, and it's won every award and deserves all of the other ones. Any award it didn't win, it deserves. It's just a fun, weird, cool setting. It's fantastic, and I was 13 years old, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I just cracked my skull open. I'm like, I'm gonna just do this every day forever. And then in like early college, like I was like 20 in the year 2000, and they're like, hey, bro, here's 3rd edition. I'm like, I'll play this. And then I'm like 27 in 2007, and I've been running and playing, and I have done. There's so many games. I mean, I've been part of so many things. And then at one point, you think, oh man, I should write something. But
at this point, you're just a lover of games.
Absolutely. And I mean, okay. So here's the thing. There's an argument. I want to say somebody much smarter than me made, where it was about rock music. I want to say it's okay, now I'm going to embarrass myself. Drummer from Nirvana.
Dave Grohl.
Dave Grohl.
Dave Grohl. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's so embarrassing. But the Dave Grohl, like at one point, he's like, the thing about rock is there's no such thing as a rock fan who isn't, up to a point, also a musician. Right? Like you can be a fan of action movies and not be an action movie star. Right, you can be a fan of the 12th century French drama and not actually be a 12th century French dramatician. But like, if you love in rock music, you can make it. Like, it's not. I mean, it's difficult, but it's not impossible, right? Like there's a steep like learning curve, but like I feel And it's another possibility to be like, Dave Grohl never said that. I'm like, okay, well, somebody like him said it. But like that's how I feel about tabletop gaming specifically. Like, if I love Magic the Gathering, I can't Magic the Gathering. Like, I can't make a new one.
Yeah.
Right. I can't. I guess I could make some fan cards and post them on the internet, which I've definitely done because I'm that kind of asshole. But like they don't do anything. Like there's nothing. There's no the aux cord. Like the cable's not plugged in. It doesn't do anything. If I really love video games, in theory, I guess I could. Video games, right? Like you gotta go to school. But like the bar for entry for game design is relatively low by comparison. And I would argue every person who's ever sat down at the table and been like, okay, you're an attacker.
Yeah,
like you're halfway there. Like that's the next step is to write it and have somebody badly misinterpret it on the internet and call you an idiot and tell you should kill yourself. Like that's the next step. And I would not necessarily encourage anyone to do that. I remember a buddy of mine. Probably the most, and I don't want to name any names because there's a chance he'll see this and there's a chance he'll be embarrassed. But one of the greatest GMs I've ever had. Like, if he called me right now and was like, Boomer, I have a spot at my table on Sunday, I'd be like, you're 7.5 hours away, so I could get there and sleep. Let's do it. Like, what about your children? They're fine.
They'll be here when I get back.
Absolutely. The 7-year-old can watch the 4-year-old. The 4-year-old will watch the 2-year-old. Like, how hard is it? The 2-year-old, she'll yell if she's hungry. Anyway, but yeah, he's an incredible guy. Amazing dude. I love hearing from him. And I remember a story that he like wrote something for fun and put it on the internet, and people were dicks. And he's like, no, never again.
Yeah.
Like, no, I can have people be dicks to me. dude, I don't want to brag, but people have been dicks to me since I was in junior high. Like, I had to do that for free. Like, I'm not putting my pearls before swine. And and all I can say is like, I get it. Like, I wouldn't necessarily encourage anybody. Like, this guy's the best writer I've ever read. Cool. That doesn't mean he has to show his work to people who are going to be assholes about it. And but like, so I was very, 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 very fortunate to have their like, and here is this crucible where amazing professionals are going to take this huge amount of time out of their day, and they will like, hey man, you might want to consider doing this or this or this or this or this. Like, so, and I was breathtakingly lucky. Like if anyone is there like, does he realize he got lucky? And I'll go, yeah. Like, has he paid his dues? No, I didn't pay a fucking due. Not one.
Fuck yeah.
Not one ever. Anyway, but so we did the thing, and basically, got through to the Final Four, and I made it to the Final Four, and I am still friends with two of the other people who are in the Final Four, who are just incredible, amazing people. Jason Nelson was in the Final Four with me. He is like as far as I believe, he is the editor-in-chief. There's a chance of like, no, I'm not doing it. I believe he's the editor-in-chief of Legendary Games. And I have written for him. I've written with him. He, for a period of time, was going onto my Tumblr where he would find stuff I'd written for free, like just stuff I just put into the ether for free. And he'd be like, hey, dude, do you mind if I just compile this, clean it up, edit it, put it into a book, put your name on the book, and like send you a check, like if it sells? Oh, like, yeah, Jason, yeah, go for it. And let's just have that, like, that nice little, like, oh, Jason.
It is nice.
$15. Oh, $15 from Jason. Oh, you said, thanks, man. He's just a mensch. Like, he's one of those dudes. Like, there's some people, I think we all know them. If the guy came to you and was like, dude, I swear to God, on my mother's life, I swear to God, I will get you this, like, $10. I'd be like, cool. I'll never see that $10. Like, no problems. I know that. And then there are those people who, my buddy Sam is one of those people. If he came to me, he's like, dude, I'm pretty sure I could get you into upper Earth orbit. I think he could do one full rotation and bring you back down. I'm pretty sure. But sign me up, bro, because you are competent and you are just, you wouldn't say it if you couldn't do it. Like, yeah, and that's how I feel about Jason Nelson. Like, if he was like, yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm like, absolutely. Like his pretty good is better than most people, I swear to God. Anyway, so he's awesome. And there's Rob McCreary, who's also in the top 4 with me. And then all 3 of us were soundly defeated by the incredible Christine Snyder, who I've never gotten a chance to meet. She beat us like we owed her money. And I look forward to the day I can bump into Christine Schneider, raise a glass, and be like, there's no shame in being beaten by the best, right? Like, if you go to fantasy basketball camp, Michael Jordan's fantasy basketball camp, and you pay the $100,000 and you get to do a real quick one-on-one with Jordan. When he beats you, you can't walk out and be like, oh, man, Michael Jordan. You got to be like, dude, I played one-on-one with Michael Jordan. I scored a point. You're like, oh, wow, that's really good. Wow, you can score a point against Jordan. Like, well, I almost scored it. Yeah, Christine Schneider, she's absolutely incredible. Amazing woman. But she's German. Like, she lives in Germany. I've never met her. I've never been to Germany. I don't think she's been here. If she ever is, I hope she'll let me be a big fanboy. Anyway, but what was really cool is the moment we lost, we got the email from Paizo to be like, hey, by the way, the winning prize for winning is that we publish something you write. Since you didn't win that, can we just put you on contract and like have you start writing for us? And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And I don't know how many of us who competed then moved on into the industry. I should hope it was a fair portion. It was really, really cool. The very first thing that I got to dig my teeth into and be like, and this is your new job, was the Emmy award-winning Pathfinder Chronicles campaign setting.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Which was it's a great book. It was later adapted and like updated because that was all written for the 3.5 rules. Yeah. So it was later adapted into just the Inner Sea World Guide for the new Pathfinder rules. So my name's on that too. And even though I didn't actually write any of it, they just used some of my work, so my name's on it. And I believe that also won an Emmy. So that was just really neat to just be like, like the highest award in gaming. That's just the first thing I wrote. That's cool. That's not a problem I have to worry about anymore.
Oh man.
Right. poor Leonardo DiCaprio spent an entire life chasing that Oscar, and you're just like, oh, you did. You were like you were a key.
Oh, did you want one of these? I have an extra. No.
Yeah. I was like, I was a key grip on this one film, and it randomly won an Oscar. So I guess I'm an Oscar winner. And
the second string kicker in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a Super Bowl ring. Do you want to see it?
That's great. So what you're saying is, don't be afraid to enter contests.
Absolutely, because here's the other thing: there are scams and stuff out there. And the other thing about game design is that there are people who have these huge, ambitious dreams and goals, and you just have to be every once in a while I'll hear from somebody, because I like to think I'm relatively open. I have a Facebook and a Twitter, and I kind of live in public up to a point. And occasionally somebody will be like, "Oh man, can I bug you? Can I put a bug in you? Or can I ping you?" And you just go, "Absolutely, man, yeah." And the problem is, a lot of us, because a lot of us grew up with, the Forgotten Realms, the Neverwinter Nights, on and on and on. And people are like, "Oh yeah, I have this idea for a 12,000 page hardcover, full color." Coffee table. I'm like, I get that. The first book I ever worked on, they had, to my understanding, 120 pages of material written. And they're like, what we want to do is we want to expand this to about 360 pages. And it is it's a pretty big book. So basically, we're going to have each one of you that we bring on, you're going to just grab a section, and for every word, write 2 more words. In general, if you get, here's the section on half elves, just add more material, and some of the sections have more than others. You're like, and you get to the halfling section, you're like, and it says, and here we will talk halfling, and you're like, well, yeah, we haven't, that hasn't been developed yet. But there were over 30 of us on the project. Right, that's a lot of people. And Mike McCarter, one of the most legendary editors in the industry, it was his swan song. He did it, he put it together, and as far as I can tell, it killed him. He's his body lives, but his soul, and it's Mike McCarter's never again.
I was wondering to be a project manager and have 30 writers working under you.
It sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
And then some of it was just oh, by the way, this is going to be 30 authors on this project. It's going to be first come, first serve. So we're going to send out the 120 page document. Every one of you needs to read it. You have 2 weeks. Know it, live it, love it. This is your thing. In 2 weeks, we're going to do a thing where you write in and are like, oh, here's the part that I want. But one of the people working on this is Wolfgang Bauer, and one of them's Eric Mona. And guess what? He it's first come, first served, but he beats you on initiative. I don't know how to say this. If you're oh man, I really want to work on the Land of the Linorm Kings, and 2 days later, Mona is actually, I need that part. Then we're going to send you a nice email that's hey, Boomer, go fuck yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now that didn't happen, but
it's
you have
first
to prepare
come, first serve, unless somebody else wants it.
Right, where you're just you're the littlest dog in this fight. We're glad to have you here, but end of the day, there's 30 people, and 29 of them outrank you. So anyway, but it was an awesome experience, and they're yeah, get to know the area, and then we have a map. Here's the giant map, because this is literally 2 continents worth of countries we're trying to do. This is 40 fully developed nations. This is 10,000 years worth of history. Including multiple deaths of gods, 1,000-year age of darkness. My son.
That just sounds like the absolute dream, man.
You're having difficulty putting your cover on for your drink?
I feel like it.
Well, let me see how I can help. This is boom. Ah, I don't know what she did, but I fixed it 1,000%.
I had to interrupt you.
You have not interrupted at all. The day that I cannot.
Welcome to the stream, young master. Yeah.
The day I can't put a Blue's Clues lid on juice for my son is the day I hang up my spurs for good. All right. Enjoy, my son.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, little buddy. Later, Aiden.
I had to interrupt you.
I'm going to apologize to you many times in your life. Your apology is accepted. but definitely not warranted. Not needed. You're my guy. I love your heart. Boom. Good man. All right.
Do you want to pretend that we're high-fiving?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to do a pretend high five? I love it.
Yeah.
Ah, nice.
I'm going to do a pretend high-five to myself on the camera.
You goofy guy. All right, you get out of here, my son. Oh, enjoy. So, I'm sorry. Would you be willing to close that door? You're a good guy. Much appreciated. Okay. Long story short. So it was nuts. Yeah, like it's up to a point where you are flipping through it and you're like, oh, okay, so here's and this is the setting, by the way, that was used for the video games Pathfinder Kingmaker and like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, where you're like
huge games, yeah, huge titles.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just like, oh, to be wandering around the world wound and to be like, oh yeah, I actually like I know this area, like I've gamed here, and like I know the guy who named that city over there. Like that's that's cool.
It's fucking awesome is what it is.
But yeah, so they wanted to. So I just got a text from my wife that just says, "Tell Aiden to get off your stream." I'm like, no, all is well. So he said, yeah, honey, I promise, he will never bother either of us ever again.
Uh-oh, that sounds dead.
I can't make that promise. I'm just like, but I really wanted to say it. Like, he will never. I don't know how you could make that promise.
He'll never darken your door again.
Yeah, no. Silence boy. So anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh, yes, just an incredible, this awesome opportunity, and Mike McCarter works his tail off, and then you're getting through because you read through it and you're like, oh man, I really want to do Lands of the Linnorm Kings. I didn't get Lands of the Linnorm Kings, but I did get Realm of the Mammoth Lords, which is right next door. So you're like sending emails to people way so much more famous than you. You're like I shouldn't be allowed legally to send you this email, but I had an idea for something you could do for your section, and it was incredible. It was an amazing experience. I will always cherish it. And I ended up getting. I really wanted Numeria of the Land of Fallen Stars. Did not get that. That's okay. It's okay. I'm not bitter. I ended up getting Jean Marais, Kingdom of the Impossible, which was amazing. That was beyond awesome. That was like, oh, why? Like Dungeons and Dragons has a thing with monks. Like monks are a thing. Monk exists as a class. And that wasn't a big deal during second edition for whatever reason. Like I remember they were like a type of cleric. Where like technically there were rules to play a monk, but you're like, that's not. They kind of went back and forth. I'm like, is this supposed to be like a cloistered monk, like a guy who like draws pictures of snails, like, and like, or do you mean a Shaolin monk who can punch people's heads clean off of their torso?
Yes,
like, both. And they kind of went back and forth. But third edition, like they just went with it. They're just like, oh no, this guy has quivering palm strike, and he will punch you in the chest, and then later he will.
There were a lot more Jackie Chan movies.
Yeah, and they were all so good, and I love them. And I firmly believe that there is a place for that in Dungeons and Dragons. Like you watch Lord of the Rings, there isn't a section where it's like my sword, my axe, and my White Lotus style. And you're like, oh, thank you, Wong Fei Hong. Like, thank you for bringing. Like, oh, this is fantastic.
That would be fucking awesome.
It'd be sick,
right? This is gonna be way easier with your ability to Crescent Moon kick an orc directly into Mordor and watch it fall over the side. But I love Kung Fu films. I love
pressure points on a giant cave troll and just make him freeze in position.
Yeah, just like what do you do? You don't want to know.
If you take 3 more steps, troll, you will die.
His heart detonates on his torso. I love Street Fighter. Like I love Street Fighter. It's a great video game. These things are near and dear to my heart. And so the idea of like, oh yeah, no, he's just a really good karate guy. You're like, oh, cool, that's awesome. Like, yeah, you should be part of the universe. But like up to a point, when you're doing a setting, you can't just say. I guess you can. Observably, you can, but you can't just say, "Oh yeah, there's vampires." somebody's going to ask, and where are the vampires from? Who's the eldest vampire? Where do
Yeah, immediately I'm wondering, do they live in a castle? Do they live in caves? Are they feral vampires? Like, yeah, you can't just, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and like you as a game designer, like that's the best part, where you're just like, if not to loop off too far, if I said Stephen Bruce, do you know that name? No. Stephen Bruce.
I do not.
He's a novelist. I love Stephen Bruce. Like I have infinite admiration for Stephen Bruce. He did the series. I believe it's pronounced Jereg or Jereg, but it's Jhereg. I got to meet Stephen Bruce once. Again, he's not bragging about this. I'm bragging, but there's no way he's like, I met Boomer. But like I did. I met Stephen Bruce. He's incredible. He does these fantastic novels about the makers of Vlad. Last name's Taltush, and he's an assassin. And so every Vlad Taltush novel, he lives in a fantasy universe, and it's like, oh man, how's Vlad gonna pull this one off? Like, oh, he's the ultimate badass. And he's so, he's just playing shuriken and just, oh man, but this, there's no way he can kill the wizard in green. Like, it's impossible. And then I don't know what, no spoilers, but Vlad pulls it off. And they're just fantastic. But Stephen Bruce, like he's just great. I love his work. He talks about, he's like, one of my tricks for writing is he's like, I have a little thing written above my computer where you can like kind of lean back, and it just says, but now I'm going to tell you something really cool. And like that's kind of an art of the writing where you sit there and you're like, oh man, what's going to happen now? Like these 6 guys bust in the door. They're gonna murder Vlad's face off. Like, what are they gonna do? And you kind of lean back and you're like, oh shit. And you look up and you go, but now I'm going to tell you something really cool. And that's, as a game designer, like that's what you get to do. And when you have the question of like, I understand this sword and sorcery. I understand there are the dragons. Whence cometh vampire? You get to go like, okay, all right, you guys have been patient, but now I'm going to tell you something really cool. So when they were like, yeah, like we're going to have kung fu. I'm like, me, please. I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy who's like, I want to do John Ray, the Kingdom of the Impossible. Where why can a guy throw a Hadouken? And you're like, well, you're gonna want to sit down for this one.
So you have them pay for you to take a trip to China, Japan, Korea, so that you could do some studies of martial arts and make sure you had the most accurate interpretations of the styles? Did you get to go like stay on some mountaintops and meditate with some Tibetan monks? Or
I would love to say that I know anything about actual martial arts, but I have realized that my wife is watching this stream, and that would be. I try to be a very honest and open man, and I just wanted to be honest with you. I don't know basically anything. But of all the things I don't know anything about, there's a laundry list of dudes. Like, I know who I would call. Okay, can I loop off? Can I loop off for a second?
Of course.
Yeah, especially if you're about to say you would call your personal friend Jet Li. I'm definitely.
I don't know what I have a lot of anticipation for this.
I would call Chuck Norris. I would call Steven Seagal.
The Steven Seagal, and you'd be like, Steve, bro. I do. Okay, I have a guy I used to work for. First name Caleb, last name Kiran, who is one of my favorite human beings. Just an awesome guy. Owned a bar. I was a bartender for him. And just a gentleman, again, just a mensch, where you're just like anything you could need. He's an ex-cop, owns this bar, super cool guy. And also, like, I remember, like, he was very, 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 very active in, like, Shotokan, to a point where you'd be like, oh, yeah, I remember when I was in Germany competing for, like international, like, Shotokan karate. And you're like, oh. So, like, I know who I would call. One of the people would be Caleb. Like, that's, like, there's, like, no question. But fortunately, I can instead just be like, I'm gonna just rewatch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because my desire for this to be realistic is down here, and my desire, like, okay, I love like what you would call more realistic kung fu films. Like, if you were to be like, Boomer, we're gonna sit down and watch Fist of Legend. You're like, oh, Fist of Legend, like Jet Li's Fist of Legend. We were like, that, I don't believe, if he violates physics, once or twice during Fist of Legend, like I'd be surprised. Like I think maybe like it's stylized, but there are several things that happen in the movie where like I bet that could really happen. Like I bet you yeah, that's pretty stylized. Like it's probably at least as grounded in reality as like the earliest Fast and the Furious films, not the later ones. The later ones.
The first ones weren't that crazy, yeah.
Yeah, like you're like you watch that first Fast and Furious movie, and you're like, yeah, I bet a guy who's really good with the car could do that. Then you watch Fist of Legend with Jet Li, and you're like, would this happen? Maybe not, but like, I bet it could. Like if 30 guys all jumped Jet Li at the same time, I bet he would kill all 30 of them, and that's probably what it would look like. Like, that's pretty realistic, and I love that. So, like, let no one poo-poo Fist of Legend. That's a fantastic film. But Shaolin Soccer.
Oh my God, I love that movie.
Shaolin Soccer has something to it that and maybe it's the physical comedy and the physics defying insanity and like just kicking people into orbit. But
I love that every single character has a different style. That style to me is what makes that movie so fun. Everyone's doing something over the top, completely different.
Right, we're like
guy,
you guys are all like
who can float.
Yeah, like you guys are like Shaolin monks, like absolutely, and like you all train together. Yeah, so you're all like brothers, like yeah. And he knows golden leg technique, and you know iron shirt technique, and that's never addressed at all. Like, of course not. No. It's basically super. Like, is anybody's like that's weird that Wolverine has claws and Colossus doesn't? Shut up. Yeah, oh, did they go to the same school? Shut up, and enjoy the movie. All right. Colossus is about to throw a guy through a wall. Absolutely. And like, that's what I want personally. So like, there's somebody out there who is capable of writing a really good Fist of Legend style source book. I'm not that guy, but a Shaolin Soccer-ish kind of thing. The one thing I was going to loop out on, I have a book I pitched to a publisher. He's a super, super nice guy. This book will at some point come out. And I don't want to say too much, and he and I realized that the book draws very heavily on Japanese mythology, and up to a point, you can say as a designer, I am not writing about, for example, Chinese mythology. I'm not trying to write about actual kung fu or wushu or any of that. I'm writing about crazy, make 'em up. Fire elementalist, fireball throwing punches, but that can be very disrespectful if you're not careful with it. And then when you watch something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, when they've actually done their research and they know what they're talking about, you're like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can just say, oh, these are fantasy guns. They use magic powder. But if you can find somebody who knows a little bit something about how actually how a revolver works, it's only to your advantage. But all that stops when you say, and by the way, I'm drawing on actual Japanese myth, like actual Japanese myth, actual Japanese legend, part of the folklore of Japan, not fantasy country that has katanas and kimonos, where, to be clear, you can fuck up and hurt people's feelings and be a real Jacobite. Like you're just like, oh, this guy is an entitled white prick who thinks that my culture is funny dress-up games. That's possible, even if you're like, dude, bro, it's not Japan, bro, it's not Japan. The moment you're like, no, it actually is Japan, you run a risk of doing a lot more damage and really making much more of an ass of yourself. So I pitched this to my publisher, and he was like, this is fantastic. Like, I love it. Like, green light, like, red, like rubber stamp, like, let's do this thing. I will publish this book. I'm really excited. And he was like, by the way, I want to get us a sensitivity reader.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, like, I would love that. Like, thank you. Like, I was actually going to ask. And he's like, no. It's like, I'm your publisher. That's my job. let me shop around for a little bit, let me get some information. And it was really neat for him to come, like to have somebody who comes to you. He's like, okay, I found this guy. He's super cool. He is a Shinto priest, lives in Japan. He is a Japanese citizen who teaches at a Japanese university in Japanese, but who also has worked in the games industry and has written in English. Actually worked on like Ars Magica back in the 90s. And you're like, oh my God. And he's like, here is this guy's email address. Send him any question you want, anytime, day or night. And realize he is doing all this, not out of the goodness of his heart, because this is his job, and he will be getting like a percentage of your sales. And you just go, oh my God, like that's so cool. And like to have somebody who's like, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And also like let me offer information. And like one of the neatest moments getting to work with this gentleman is he's like I want to be clear. I am not Japanese American. I was like, okay, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm not. What I'm trying to tell you is I'm not Japanese American. I can never be Japanese American. I wasn't born in America. I'm not American. I've never been to America. I am not Japanese American, and I never will be Japanese American. I'm Japanese. For this reason, there is a chance that I will be the only Japanese person who will read your book. However, if you are very, very, very lucky, more than one Japanese American person will read your book. I am not Japanese American, and I cannot speak to the experience of Japanese Americans. Please realize that I understand, as a Japanese person living in Japan who speaks and writes in English, who is a Shinto priest, I understand that Japanese Americans are often very offended by white Americans, black Americans, like non-Asian Americans, use of kimono. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's called cultural appropriation, and it's fucking awful. And like, yeah, we hear about it every year at Christmas, or I'm sorry,
Halloween. Yeah,
that's the one. I'm like, yeah, it's up there with War Bonnet. Like, I guess the case, I guess up, like it's not quite blackface level, I guess. But I'm like, that's. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, because America is a nightmare, and we have a really bad history. Like, you only get like, I don't like beyond a certain point. You're like, is it all slavery and genocide? And you're like, yeah, it's
that's it. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
It's nothing but. I'm sorry. And you're like, is anything? You're like, no. Whatever you're thinking of, yeah, it's rooted in genocide and or slavery. Anyway. He's like, I understand that. He's like, like intellectually, like at a distance. He's like, I will only say that I, as a Japanese person living in Japan, do not understand that, and that I do not know any other Japanese people living in Japan who works at Japanese university and speaks Japanese. I do not know any person who would think that was weird. Like if Bruce Willis came to Japan and did a commercial and he wore a kimono, I cannot fathom that someone would say that is bad. Like, it is awesome. I love that. I would love to see him in a kimono. I would love to see him, on and on and on. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And he's like, yeah, but you need to be careful because nobody gives a shit what I think because I'm a fucking Japanese guy. I'm not Japanese American. And if you offend a Japanese American guy, you can't turn and be like, the Japanese guy was cool with it, because I will say, I'm not. I'm not cool. I'm not Japanese American, asshole. And like we went kind of round and round. I was like, okay, so like let's talk about it. He's like, it's not that we don't take our culture seriously. We do. He's like, would you say that Americans take Christmas and or like cowboys, like the Wild West? Would you say you like that's dear to you? You care about it? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. Are there sometimes it would be okay to wear a Santa Claus outfit and sometimes it would not be? I'm like, yeah. He's like, sometimes it'd be okay to be like cowboy and sometimes not. I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. You don't understand Japanese culture. Do not try to understand when it is okay to use a kimono or a katana and when it is not. I will try to help you, but also realize I'm not Japanese American. I'm like, this is so helpful. Like, this guy's the best. Like, I just love him. It's
super interesting.
Really,
yeah.
I'd like the example of sometimes being able to dress like a cowboy, but not all the time, because Jahan and I are both are from Texas. and everyone dresses like a cowboy all the time. The Texas,
Sure.
they don't follow that rule.
But like, here's the thing. I can imagine a non-Texan doing a bit with like a cowboy, like, I'm a Texas cowboy, pew pew pew, and to look over and like a group of Texans being like,
yeah, a bunch of guys
That's
wearing
fair.
buckets and boots and be like, that shit ain't funny, son.
yeah, that ain't funny. Like, why?
That's fair.
Tell me why. And you're like, well, you ain't from Texas, you won't get it. Like, that's all I'm saying. Like,
No, it sounds really great that you're doing all that. I wish some other I've read some books recently even that I'm like, references to traveling people in not such great ways, and
the Romani people.
Yeah, and then not referring to native peoples correctly in books. It's a whole thing. I'm glad that you're at least, here's
the entire industry is becoming more aware of it, and it's really great to see. Even Green Ronin Publishing has a Cthulhu game coming out, and instead, I think, of calling it Madness, they're calling it Weird, aren't they, Jahan? Or maybe even Alien?
Yeah, they changed the name of it to not be disparaging to
but that way you're not
with
going
mental illness.
It's not sanity anymore. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You're not losing sanity, and you're not going insane because that's not as sensitive as it was when Cthulhu stuff was written.
It's such a okay, all right. So here's what I'll say. I am a firm believer that what we're talking about right now is hugely, it's vastly, it's the number one thing of importance. That
we love to talk about sensitivity in games, and then especially the protections and tools at the table to make sure that your players are having an enjoyable time. Because of my background, because of all the law enforcement stuff, I did investigations for bodies for a while. So I don't like morgues and I don't like hangings. And Jahan, as a game master, knows that. So if there's like a focus on a dead body scene, I'll step away. He knows, earmuffs. And if some people want to investigate dead bodies, I get it. It's a tabletop game. You have to ask questions. But that kind of stuff's a trigger for me. So we love talking safety in games and making sure that everyone at the table is protected, safe, and having fun. And that starts with you guys on the rules side, right?
Well, yeah, and it's to empower the storyteller to do again, not to loop off too far. I'm working on a book right now that uses the monsters that as I was working on it, I'm like, oh, a lot of these are like, this is basically demon possessed or like evil spirit possessed animals, which fine. But then you have to stop for a moment and go, is there anything in here to prevent somebody from being like, it's an evil dog? Well, no, there's no rules in there. And in fact, it's an evil dog is a pretty huge part of the horror. It's one of the tropes of the genre. I mean, Cujo, for God's sake. Evil dog. I mean, you're just like, okay, well, what about the Resident Evil films? Oh, look, there's some dogs that are zombie dogs. But then you have to stop and you're like, I am a person who, if somebody mentions Marley and Me, I'm going to tear up a little bit thinking about the preview of Marley and Me. To actually watch the film, you're like, no, I'll die. Don't, please don't. I will. They only have so much liquid in my body, and if I cry, I will die of crying related asphyxia. But thank you. But thank you for bringing it up. Like, I am very sensitive about that, and I literally, I'm working on the content warning section because I'm like, I want to get it right, and to just be at the moment of like, this book is for telling scary, cool, interesting stories with your friends. It is not a book about how animal abuse is cool. People who actually hurt animals are bad. I don't know how to say this. Our feelings about people who abuse animals are similar to those of the character of John Wick. Through the John Wick documentary film series. If you use this book to tell really cool stories with your friends, like that'll be awesome. If you use this to traumatize a fellow player who is, mourning the loss of a beloved family member, I personally hate you and will fist fight you in a parking lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, see, I'm fortunate. I don't have a lot of most of my triggers are, never socially okay. So I just don't want people to make fun of me for being Persian or call me a terrorist and shit. But for the most part, people won't do that. I don't usually have to ask in a game setting, because at that point,
Yeah. If you meet the guy who you're just like, I just feel like he's waiting to drop out. I don't think I'm in the game with it.
Yeah, exactly. If you're at the table, odds are you're probably cool and aren't going to do that. So that's really my only thing that bothers me for some reason, some crazy reason.
Yeah, it's weird that you don't like that.
That's weird. I'm just fucking sensitive, I guess. But yeah.
I feel like there's two factors at work. The one very strongly good and one very strongly bad. I want to say that's the yin and yang of our of the culture that we have sort of stepped in. But that's entirely possible that any person with any actual understanding of Taoism would that's the most offensive shit I've ever heard. So I'll say, okay, on the plus side, I truly believe that gaming can be used to enlighten.
Mm-hmm.
But
very much so.
There's a story. I don't know. Y'all might not have heard it, or you may have. I consider it to be it's that famous apocryphal tale that everyone's told. Where you're oh, there's the guy, right? Super cool dude, and he moves to a small town, and he's a gamer. But he moves to the small backwoods. I want to say Kentucky, Alabama, South Carolina. And he's oh man, I'm gonna be here, and he can't find any other gamers. But it's a couple of kids from the trailer park, and they're oh yeah, we want to play Dungeons and Dragons. He's okay, and he's running the game, and he's loving it. And 7 sessions in, they're oh man, our characters are all really badass. And he just casually drops. He's yeah, it's interesting that they're all African American. And you watch skinny methed out kid be what? And you're yeah, absolutely. Didn't you realize that? And the scales fall from their eyes, and the kids are I know, and I was never racist again. Well, I wanted that to be true so bad. I can taste it. I want to have that moment where it's some guy who's I don't feel like I was ever transphobic, but I feel like I lived in a culture that is deeply transphobic, and so by osmosis, or I was never homophobic, but I lived in a culture that was, right, and so I was steeped in it wasn't propaganda that was sold to me. It was just the background radiation of everything.
Yeah.
One day I was playing in a game, and I had chosen to play a character of a different race, a different ethnicity, a different gender, a different gender identity, and even a million things. And I suddenly, for one moment, as something happened, I literally saw the cosmos around me turn, and I beheld the thin patina of transphobia that I had lived with my entire life. It was clear. I watched it shatter, and I went, oh. And I want it to be true so bad. Yeah. And is it possible? Is it true? I don't know.
Well, I mean, so yeah, we all have unconscious bias, and accepting that's very important to I mean, because you can't help that. You know what I mean? It's when you put your fingers in your ears and say, nah, I'm perfect. No, I don't. That's when it becomes the issue. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. I mean, tabletop role-playing games, same reason why books, people that read more, tend to be more empathetic and whatnot. It's because you're literally spending your time thinking about how other people think and problem solve, and you're getting inside people's heads, and it really helps you connect in different ways with people,
I would say lots of people who I met in real life seem to be really far up their ass in their own story. And when you're so far up your ass in your own story, it's hard to get other perspectives. And tabletop role-playing games, and especially playing different systems, different games, and different characters, it'll really help you step outside of your comfort zone and see things from a third-person perspective. And it's just everyone, no matter how great you are, just pull yourself out of your own ass for a little while, right? And just look around.
And I remember somebody that posted an image, or some person posted on Twitter this thing of like, oh god, this new Vampire the Masquerade, this 5th edition. Like, since when is Vampire the Masquerade, or since when is White Wolf woke? And that, like, Phil Brucato was like, I think about 92. A picture of like the punk rock crotch, with like the, you're like, oh, missteps along the way aside, you're like, here's one of the original architects of the World of Darkness being like, missteps aside, we have aimed for wokeness since inception, like 92, and like I want that to be true, and then to my mind the problem. So you're like, there's a plus and a minus. So like the plus is you're like, yes, it can. But I think there is that the minus to it, that you can have a moment where a culture is reduced to a group of stereotypes, and that can end up not being examined, and that just horrifies me. Where I remember there was a writer on Twitter he's a big fan of Ravenloft, and like Ravenloft the setting, and I basically watching him live tweet the like, what do you do about? And I basically watching him live. They're coded as travelers, right? Like, where do you begin? Is it possible to unpack the harmful stereotypes of 20th century horror film and the assumptions of, Dracula and on and on and on, and then what's been baked into the Vistani, if they exist, since the 70s? And like, can this be salvaged? Is it chuck it all out and start over again? And that's very difficult. And to see people jumping out and be like, I would be willing to maybe try to help, and then people be like, oh no, I didn't realize how bad these roots are infected. We have to burn this entire thing.
So it's one of those things that the Vistani are really cool, the less you know about them, right? When it's these portal traveling people, and they live amongst the real world and the dream realm, and they walk in between, and they know these cosmic shortcuts. All of that's really cool. And
super cool.
The more magnifying glass you put on it, the worse it starts to look. So when you said, should we just throw it away and start over? Yeah, probably. That's probably exactly what they should do, is throw it away and start over. There's nothing wrong with being cosmic travelers. It's everything after that is wrong.
Yeah, start a cosmic travelers and, end up somewhere not racist. It's good stuff.
That's right. Like, I don't know, man. Like, and that is the great question of like, can you use Lovecraft and Lovecraft's tropes to not only tell a story that isn't racist, but it is like actively anti-racist? Like, is that possible? Jordan Peele says he'll try. You're like, oh, great, man, I'll watch that.
Oh, yeah.
And then, but if somebody else is like, nah,
no.
you're a bit. I also can where you're heading with this.
I don't know if you saw Lovecraft Country on HBO.
That's the one, yeah.
That's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's. Was he involved in that?
I want to say he was the executive producer.
Jeez, okay, that makes a lot of sense now. But yeah, I loved what they did. They took, because Lovecraft is a racist old piece of shit that designed a cool mythology, and they took it and they used it to highlight. Yeah, they used it to highlight black excellence, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolute admiration for it. But like, I can imagine someone 6 months before Lovecraft Country come out and be like, no, like this is not, it's undoable. And he'd be like, I see where you're coming from.
No.
Like, fair enough. So I don't know. I have these high hopes, and I also have these like, because anyway.
Yeah, that's a conversation that we had with the developer of the Cthulhu Awakens game. The Kickstarter is going on right now. One of the writers is a friend of ours, and he was talking about how like they're changing a lot of the lore fundamentally to accommodate these facts. You know what I mean? And that is definitely part of the conversation.
Yeah, and what I don't want is I would like to put off my, I hope not inevitable, please not inevitable, but if it is inevitable, my decline into shittiness. I want to just put it off. We just go, is it a fact of the universe that any creator, any writer, eventually you go, God, that turns out he's a piece of shit all along. Like just keep talking long enough. Eventually you're like, God damn it. Like, why did he? But I
you say that, and I immediately think of Stephen King, who's hailed as such a great author, but also describes the way women feel by the texture of their nipples. So, will every great author go down the hill at some point? Yeah, maybe.
Fuck.
So like I just want to like that moment where you go, God, like this creator is a piece of shit. I want to put that off. There's a chance that someday, I'll be 80 and I'll say something and my son will look at me and just like, I can't believe you said that. And all I can say is like, I don't understand anymore. It was fine back in the 2020s. I'm like, it was never fine. I accept that will happen. I am going to rage against the dying of the light on that one. I really truly believe this. Not to loop off too far. Are either of you like Werewolf the Apocalypse? Like how much background you have?
A little bit. I played some White Wolf. I played mostly Vampire and Changeling.
I love Changeling. Love Vampire the Masquerade. One of the big things is that Vampire, of course, they recently came out with the 5th edition. Yeah. And that's cool. That's good, and it's getting a ton of people who otherwise wouldn't play Vampire the Masquerade into it. Which that has to be the goal. Like that legitimately has to be the goal. I remember there was some comment. This is not to loop off too far. There was a game or an adventure that was released on Drive-Thru RPG or somewhere else that just from the title you go, I'm sorry, how did this get? And there was a bunch of argument of like, should this be censored? Should this be censured? Like, should we yank this away? The guy who created it, like, should he be tarred and feathered and dragged through the streets, or what is he trying to say? La la la. And I remember one of the comments was just like, look, man, I'm not in favor of censorship for anybody ever for any reason. But like, we're a small industry. Is this going to make more people play games in general, or is it going to be? Is this going to turn people off? And if the answer is you're courting controversy for the sake of controversy, fuck off, man. Come on, like do that somewhere else. The edgy late night stand up shit has got to go. And so the idea that like, oh, Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition is bringing people in. You're like, oh, cool. Everybody's excited about Werewolf the Apocalypse doing a 5th edition. I will be real happy when they do this if they can fix like one or two minor problems, especially with the depiction of there were 3, there are now 2 because one of them is extinct. Mostly Native American tribes of werewolves.
Yeah.
It's to a point where if you are a Werewolf the Apocalypse fan and you are on a phone call with your publisher who is also a Werewolf the Apocalypse fan, you just can't say one of the names of one of the tribes. You literally have to, the younger brother tribe. And he's like, yeah, I understand. I don't think we can do any material with that. you're like, really? Even if it's approached sensitively? He's like, no, not even if it's approached sensitively. I don't think there's a way you can do this. Maybe steer clear. Like, it's anyway. Again, as I say, like high hopes, dark fears. Maybe bright hopes, dark fears. That rings better.
Well,
I said that.
with the state of the industry now, and the fact that they did start, from a woke ideology, I'm hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it can be done. Okay. I'll say this. If you had told me back in 2007 when I was first getting into Paizo, if you had like shown me the numbers for Vox Machina, right? If you'd been like, hey, someday, like, here's Deborah Ann Wool, best known for her
depiction of Paige from Daredevil.
Karen Page from Daredevil, but she was also fantastic in True Blood. And you're like, oh, right. By the way, fellow True Blood actor Joe, is it Magliano?
Mm-hmm.
Mango jelly is what we say. That's what we say.
Mango jelly. Mm-hmm.
That's
Gary said it one day, and I can't say his name right now. So
right, and he's just like, oh, and that's so funny. Like, but like I read on the internet, I don't think it was on a nerd site. I think it was like Yahoo, where they're like, interestingly enough, the two of them never discussed their shared love of Dungeons and Dragons while on the set of True Blood. And she's got a new show coming out where she'll be doing Dungeons and Dragons. If you would, like, I would just have laughed in your face. Like, I can imagine shit. Imagine unicorns. Like, I don't want to brag, but like, I'd imagine entire continents. And if you're like, yeah, here's what the world will be like in 2022, and you're just like, fuck off. No,
I can't even express to you how much more sense fantasy makes than real world sometimes. I totally understand the rules of a fantasy world, but when it comes to real life, I just don't know who the fuck they're gonna elect.
Yeah. Fair. And it's stupefying to me. We're just like, what happened? Why did Critical Role succeed? Like, I remember I was at work. This is a while ago. This is a job or two ago. But I'm standing there, and it's this group of high schoolers who were like talking about Stranger Things. All I could do is like turn and be like, why do you like Stranger Things? And like, that's a really good show. I'm like, nah. I understand why I like Stranger Things. I was one of the kids on the bikes.
Yeah.
I remember riding to go play Dragon's Lair, and then going home and playing Dungeon. I get why I fucking like that show. No one has ever been surprised that I like Spider-Man. No one's really like, really? You know a lot about Spider-Man? I look like I know a lot about Spider-Man. I get why but I don't understand why you do. Like, why is Spider-Man the #1 film ever? Don't tell me it's because Doctor Strange is in it. I also like Doctor Strange. I know more about Doctor Strange than you do. I don't know what happened to our country, and I'm not mad about it, but I'm very confused. Like, yeah, that's all I'll say. So maybe that's why I'm so nervous, because it's like, this is our moment to shine. Like, there's our moment in this, and I'm just worried they'll be like, and what do you have to say, Dungeons and Dragons? And we're just going to racist, and you're like, and that was Dungeons and Dragons. That's all we need to hear about them forever. And
that's actually a question I had for you, is with Vampire getting picked up for like TV shows, and with Critical Role success right next to Dungeons and Dragons, you having been attached to Paizo and Pathfinder so long, I think there is some kind of realistic chance that you would get approached for a screenplay or a movie, or to help with some kind of stuff. How would you respond to something like that? Do you think it's possible?
That's a sick question.
That's a fantastically wonderful question. So I'll say this. Paizo has had enormous success. Well-deserved success in spite of me. And I would any producer where you just go, look, man, I wanted to write about evil druid. They made it about something powerful and emotional. And I got mad because I was like, what about my evil druids? So I don't. What's funny is I have not done anything for Paizo, and now like for several years, which is fine. I have I have also been very busy. Like, I don't like, again, I'm just like, yeah.
And that's one of those things to me where if a Hollywood exec is going through, they're going to be tearing through lots of old content, reading old adventure modules, and looking for what's the best. And if there's already a video game world based on adventure modules you worked on and things with your name attached, you could be pulled back into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I have I played through Kingmaker. I've run Carrion Crown, which is another excellent AP. My name is only on one adventure for an AP, and that is the Infernal Syndrome, which is part of Council of Thieves. And I want to be very clear. James Jacobs is a really good man. It says James Jacobs and Clinton J. Boomer. It should say James Jacobs in spite of Clinton J. Boomer. He knocked it out of the park. He's a fantastic guy. And like my contributions to it were I'll say minimal. But like, I am honored every time I get an email from Paizo that's like, hey man, we're doing, like, I worked on Ultimate Intrigue and I worked on Horror Adventures. I think those were like the last two that I did. And just to get an email to just be like, hey man, we're putting together this book with like scary monsters in it. Can you want to give us 2,000 words on an archetype, a monster, a feat, a spell? And you just go, absolutely. Like, I would be honored and delighted. Now, I unfortunately was not available to do any work for Pathfinder Chronicles, like, 2nd edition.
Oh, what a shame. That's actually the first Pathfinder book I bought. I have 2nd edition. I never got into Pathfinder. I started with 4th edition, so I'm pretty hungry to go back and try this new version of the old things.
Sometimes I miss 3rd. That's where I started, right when I was about 12.
Well, sure. And I love 3rd edition. It's what is it's what I cut my teeth on. I mean, we're just like, I was 20 years old. I'd been running 2nd edition, which is, I think we knew it at the time. It's not a great engine, and that's not to poo-poo it. That's not to be like, there's dog shit. I think even at the time being like, yeah, I feel like getting Monty Cook and Skip Williams and Jonathan Tweet, all three of whom I've met, who are all just incredible, fantastic people. But you just go, getting them to just basically reinvent the wheel and just be like, and here's 3rd edition. There's such a change from 2nd to 3rd. It's amazing. I never got into 4th. I think I ran one adventure for 4th edition. I was just like, this isn't my cup of tea. Which is not, again, to poo-poo 4th edition. I know people who just like, oh no, 4th edition was killer. It's what got me into gaming, and you guys good for you. There's a story. I loop out so much. I want to apologize. There's a story. A buddy of mine came to me. He's a gamer, awesome guy, and he was like, "Hey man, my wife wants to run a game." I was like, "Okay, that's really cool because she's a gamer, but she's a gamer by marriage. She like she met a guy, he was a gamer, and was like, okay, cool, I'll get into this." And what she wanted to run, because she was kind of into she was in a Taekwondo class, and like she'd seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she's like, what I want to do, the adventure I want to run, it's gonna be like a one shot, maybe like a 1d4 shot, right? We're just like, we'll take what we can get. She's like, the adventure is gonna start. All of the players are grandmaster, like senseis. Each one of them is in their room in the 5-petaled Lotus Temple, where each one of them, this guy's the master of fire, kung fu, right? This guy's the master of metal, right? This is like la la la. There's the 5 of them, and they each have their class of like, a couple of students who are learning. And just then, the 5-petaled Lotus Temple is attacked by 101 orcs, ranging from the 120th level Billy Badass all the way down to like 50 Nimnode, like 1st level, Chuckle Fox. And that all the players are like, oh yeah, I'm like 8th level monks. And I'm like, okay, first and foremost. And then, so part of the adventure is protect your students. Because, like, part of it's like, I'm a 2nd level monk. And you're like, okay, I don't know how many arrows you can take to the head. I, as a master of air kung fu, can casually sweep 100 of them out of the air at a time. But there's a lot of orcs here. And, like, I'm like, what a fun adventure. I would play that. If I sat down at a convention and somebody's like, okay, here's your sheet, you're an 8th level monk, here are your powers. And you're like, this says I can punch through metal casually. You're like, yeah, dude, it's metal. Who gives a shit? You can headbutt through it. Like, nobody cares. And they're like, okay. And like, here's the map. And you're like, here's the orcs. And you're like, sir, that appears to be a wheelbarrow full of orc miniatures. And you're like, yeah. I have another one. Like, if someone did that, I would be wowed. I was blown away. And he's like, I think I'm going to tell her to use 4th edition. Like, I think that's the engine for it. Like, you can build 5 8th level monks with the correct equipment. Like, what is the class level with the class level character role appropriate magical items that a character should have as an 8th level monk? Is there a machine that will do that calculation for me? Yes, there is. It works for 4th. If I just need to generate like 100 orcs, challenge ratings between, say, 12 and 1, yeah, 4th, like, who can run that combat the fastest? Who is going to give me the most stylized, like, and then I'm going to, like, rear back, and I'm doing my encounter power because I have to clear a straight line. I just need to carve through everybody within 30 feet. 4th edition. Right, and like anybody who's like, oh, the 4th edition's too video gaming, well, maybe that's what I want.
Yeah. You know? Having been at the time a brand new to tabletop role playing game person, I was an actor, and I approached it as a role playing game. I didn't know that it was too video gamey. I didn't know that it was too or wasn't too anything. Yeah. I just wanted to play fantasy characters in a world. And it let me do that for the first time, and I absolutely loved it. It's not my favorite system, but it was absolutely what I needed to get into tabletop gaming.
It was perfect for that. Because I did know it was too video gaming and whatnot, but, went out, got it. It was the new thing from Wizards. Of course I'm going to play it. I was a fanboy, and we played the crap out of it. And, it was fun. It was so streamlined. And what it did to the hobby, to me, was made it more accessible to much more people. It made it more popular. Thus, we got more content in the long run. It was a great thing for the hobby.
It's funny about 4th edition, Jahan, is you and I reconnected over 4th edition. You were the game master right at the tail end, and then they started.
Yeah, that was 4th edition. Yeah,
they started releasing the 5th edition playtests, and we used to go to my little 1-bedroom apartment and do the 5th edition playtest.
Yeah, that was fun. Floor. Good times.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I've lived through enough edition wars at this point. Like, I remember reading the letter from a guy in Dragon Magazine to be like, 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. No, you're going to get rid of spheres and change it to domains for clerics? Go ahead and cancel my subscription. And you're like, it's 1998. The hobby has peaked.
It turns out that guy works at TSR now.
And that man's name. I don't know. But and God bless him for it. But yeah, what I would say. I have two questions I want to answer. One of them's from a long ass time ago. And it's about mimics. If somebody were to approach me and say, would you want to have some involvement? Yes. I don't know how comfortable Paizo would be with that. I've never been an employee of Paizo. I'm a freelancer. They send me they tell me what to write, and I write it, and I send it to them, and then they just own it. Where they're just like, I'm pretty sure we don't legally have to put your name on this, so we're doing you a favor. They probably do. But they're allowed to change the entire thing, though. They're totally allowed to be like, yeah, we just removed, you wrote us 2,000 words and we changed all of them. You're like, cool, I'll take my check now. Like, that's, But no, they are fantastic. They're wonderful people. I would work with Paizo again across the board in a heartbeat. I don't know I have no idea what I would do for them now. We're like, cool, you guys still doing the original Pathfinder? No. Okay, so completely new game. What's happened with the setting? A lot of stuff. Okay, so I don't know your system or your setting or anyone who works there now. Cool. All right. Well, let me know what I can do for you, and I'll be around. But like, yeah, no, they are awesome. If somebody wanted to do if Netflix was like, oh, you know what we need to do is do an adaptation of Carrion Crown. I have strong opinions about Carrion Crown, which are influenced by the strong opinions of like F. Wesley Schneider, who was like the managing like developmental editor for that adventure path, and who as far as I know now works at Wizards of the Coast. I would just tell Netflix you should hire him. But if you really want to, I will gladly show up and sit in the room. And like that, what I would personally, what I would want is if I were to be pinged by Netflix, I mean whoever, I have a novel that's out, that's called The Hole Behind Midnight, and I love that because that's me. Like that one's mine. I wrote it. I have no one to blame but myself. Now I do have a ton of people who were there for me. I mean, I to be clear, I have had cheerleaders, I have had backers, I've had supporters, I've had editors. I could not begin to list off the number of people who've been beyond supportive and influential to me, who've made everything I did possible. But like at the end of the day, you're like this. It's The Hole by Midnight. Like this is me. So like that's what I'd want to be pinged for. I mean, at the end of the day, like rather than say something I did for Paizo,
right?
Which I don't own, right? Where my total influence on it or impact on it or what I did or didn't do is pretty subject for debate, personally. Which is one of the things I did recently. Came out, I want to say just about a year ago. Was a thing for the company is called High Level Games, and the book it's called Twists of Obscenity, Esoterica of the Bali. That was really cool. I wrote that with a good friend of mine, Dr. Joe Weinberg, and it's for Vampire the Masquerade. It's not for 5th edition because I've never played 5th edition Vampire and do not know the rules. But so it's just for Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, which is basically just the revised version of Revised, and Revised is just the slightly improved version of 2nd edition. And 2nd and 1st are like unlike most edition wars, almost everything from World of Darkness is like, yeah, it's basically backwards compatible. Like they didn't change that much until you get to 5th, and they're like, oh, everything's completely out the window. Like blood points aren't a thing anymore. And you go, I don't know. Your new world is strange and confusing to me. I like that book, The Twist of Obscenity, Esoteric of the Bali. I like that because I got to dip my toes into an established canon, which is what I can do with Paizo. Like when Paizo says, "Hey man, write us up some characters," you're like, "Oh cool, here's your established canon. Here's the world as it exists. I can use all your demon lords. I can use your countries." But it also, that book is not beholden to later canon, right? If I something up for Paizo and I'm like, oh yeah, that continent sank, but somebody has to deal with that problem later. Some other developer down the line is like, oh dude, that asshole sunk a continent. Whereas if I do that, sorry guys. Whereas if I do that for High Level Games, people would just be like, yeah, that's not canon. Like that was something on Storyteller's fault. Which to my mind, it's the perfect level of flexibility where you go, I can use all the canon that's come before. Anyone who likes the canon, obviously, that I established is welcome to build from it. But other designers, like any storyteller or GM who's like, oh, I like this. I'll strip this for parts. Cool. A storyteller who buys a copy of it and is like, this is hot garbage. You're like, hey man, thanks for purchasing a copy of the PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell a friend. Don't tell them it's that. Don't tell them it's hot garbage. But like, they can take what they want, leave the rest. I guess I think that's a.
I think we're seeing a lot more of that right now in tabletop games. I know that Universal Systems has been around forever. It's nothing new, but it seems like there are a lot more kind of homebrewy type of things going on now, where even major companies are a lot more comfortable with you stripping away what you don't want.
Well, what I thought was genius, and so, again, stop me if I'm wrong. There's a chance I'm going to say something. You'll be like, Boomer, that's not a thing. What is wrong with you? Like raincoats for ducks. I thought they were just genius. And you're like, or do you think that's a thing? That's not a thing. You're like, that's how Elon Musk made his millions. No. Somebody told me, so there's a chance you'd know so much more than I do. I get that a lot in my life. But to my understanding, the core rule for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is you can take stuff from any book, but we assume you're borrowing from the player's handbook and like one other source. Like if you go to, and I was like, oh, that's genius, because that becomes the problem if you're writing for, like, say, Pathfinder, or you're like, oh, like, here's a fighter, and then you create a subclass of effectively an archetype for a fighter, and you put it in the Ultimate Combat book. If you put something kind of similar, or that edge cases off of it in a different supplement, you can. I think the character's name is Pun Pun, but there's a famous example of like using these 13 books from 3.0/3.5. It is possible to make a kobold first level character that has his first action changes all of his stats to 40, and then you're like, oh shit. You're like, as my first, you're like, oh, so you have a 40 strength. Like, I have a 40 strength and 40 intelligence and 40 charisma. And then for the second part of my first action, I get infinite actions. And you're like, okay. And you're like, oh, I see the problem here, because you can just put together these little pieces like, well, if then, this then. And I mean, and that works in computer programming. But like it's a scary thing to do as a designer, and the genius of Dungeons and Dragons, to my understanding, being like, yeah, we realize it's possible to be like, well, this guy has an ability that lets him kick as a free action, and this guy has an ability that lets him deal extra damage on a kick. Now, this guy has a rule that if he misses with a kick, he gets an additional kick later in the same round. Now, according to this, you can take your last attack first in the round at a lower. Basically, sort of like, I get 2 this round, but the second attack's a -5. You can actually take the -5 one first. Long story short, due to this, I punched the continent in half and killed God. But yeah, the idea that the Dungeons and Dragons is like, oh yeah, no, you can use the player's handbook and then any one other source. So if you want to use Van Richten's guide, awesome. You want to use the Ravnica book, awesome. You want to use any of these others, but like these aren't necessarily. And then you obviously as a storyteller are welcome to do whatever you want. Yeah. But don't worry about your players showing up and being like, well, I've read 7 books you haven't, and as such, as my first action, I win.
Yeah.
but like, yeah, that's much more homebrew. Like the idea of like, oh yeah, here's if I'm not mistaken, the Eberron book was kind of released as fan material.
Yeah, I think that's right. The first Eberron was
the original.
Kind of, your story that you were telling reminded me of that earlier. I think it was a fan competition, and Eberron ended up winning a fan competition.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Keith Baker, who's amazing. But I was gonna say, but like the 5e Eberron.
Oh,
yeah, Keith Baker was just like, hey guys, if y'all want to play Eberron using 5e rules, like here they are. Like here's like my fan material. And that people, for reasons, were like, this is amazing. And you're like, well, yeah, obviously it is.
Eberron is very popular.
Yeah, and good as well. It should be. I mean, it'd be huge. But yeah, so like, yeah, I'll just put it out there because every game designer's a fan. You know. Oh, and I realize I'm just talking your ear off here. By the way, what time is it even? I don't know.
Let's wrap up with the Mimic story. And then, Jahan, if you have any other follow-up questions, you can hammer them with follow-up questions afterwards.
Yeah.
If you have any follow-up questions, So look, I keep looking for my phone to be like, I'll just check my phone to check what time it is. I'm on my phone. Like,
Found it.
Oh, it's here. It's just right there, you guys. It doesn't have the time on it. I'm dumb. So the reason I happen to know that mimics are completely OGL, like anybody can do anything they want with them, is because I had at this time I had written my material for Pathfinder Chronicles campaign setting, and the Pathfinder Chronicles campaign setting, like that beautiful hardcover book, was released into the wild, and an awesome woman who had been part of RPG Superstar, like she had watched the whole thing. She turns out she was in charge of guest programming for VCon, which is in Vancouver, Canada. They're like, yeah, like it's like basically a comic convention. Like it's no Gen Con, but it's VCon. And she like talks to a bunch of her people, and she's like, I want to get some like professional game designers from Paizo to come to this. And the people at VCon are awesome, and they're like, yeah, totally. Tell them we'll get them a hotel room and pay their badges and get them like a weekend stipend. And they're like, yeah, we'll put them on some panels. And it was just amazing. Like never before in my entire life. And I've been like, I'm sorry, you went to what now? Like,
yeah, that sounds awesome.
Sounds sick.
Come be a guest at VCon. And you're like, okay, I would really like that. That sounds great. This is the greatest moment of my life. I'll see if I'm free that weekend. So I ended up going, and it was incredible. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And there was another professional game designer, Jason Nelson specifically, who, because at one point I was really worried. I'm like, oh man, it's in Canada. Like I'm a kid from the Midwest. I like live 4 hours south of Chicago. Like how am I gonna? How do you get to Vancouver? And he was like, bro, I live in Seattle. Like I'm actually right down the street from the Paizo offices. You were you were in the Final Four with me. You're a super cool guy. How about this? You fly into Seattle. SeaTac, Seattle Tacoma International Airport, goes everywhere. You can fly. Think of any airport you've ever heard of. Like you're like, well, what about my Uncle Bob's? Like, yes, that one flies into SeaTac. No problem. Like if you want to fly to Vancouver, there's a chance you're going to need to go to Chicago and go to O'Hare. And if you're a kid from a small town like me, you will just die. Like you're like, oh no, it's O'Hare, and then you died. But if you're just flying to SeaTac, like you can get there from anywhere. Like you can accidentally fly to SeaTac. And he's like, I'll pick you up at SeaTac. I'll take you to my house. You can crash on my couch, and then we'll drive because it's Seattle to Vancouver. It's like 20 minutes. It's across the border. You just pull up, and there's a Canadian. They're just like, hey, how you doing there? And you're like, great. And they're like, awesome, welcome to Canada. You fly in, but you don't want to do that in O'Hare. Well, like, oh, you're flying to Canada. He's like, just do this thing. Come on up. It's going to be great. I'm like, I believe in you, Jason Nelson. And I want to be clear. He was right. He was 1,000% right about that and everything else. Guy's amazing. So we go up there and we're hanging out. And he's like, I don't know, like, what do you want to do? You're in Seattle for a day or two. You're sleeping on my couch. I'm like, I don't know, everything. And he's like, I take you to the Space Needle. I'm like, I mean, I've seen Frasier. He's like, yeah, you've seen it.
I want to watch guys throw fish.
Yeah, do you have any fish around that can be thrown? He's like, yeah, sure. And but at one point he's like, hey man, do you want to just go by the Paizo offices? I'm like, I'm sorry, what now? He's like, the Paizo offices, like they're right down the road. Like we write for them. Do you want to just pop in and say hi? Like you're probably gonna see these guys at like Gen Con and stuff. I'm like, I think that would be, you know what? If we have time between the fish, could we just go to this to there? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So we just pop over. And it's like walking in, like, hey, what's happening? Like, oh, hey, you assigned me. Like, hey, Eric Mono. Oh, hey, Lisa Stevens. Like, it was super cool, just wandering around. And I'm trying to decide. Honey, is my wife? Is you still watching the stream?
Mm-hmm.
Is she Little Miss Scarlet?
That's her.
I think she's still there.
I have a story about this. It's embarrassing to me, but I'm not going to tell it about something I did that was embarrassing and stupid. My first time at the Paizo offices. But bump into me at a con, and I'll tell you. Now and then. And hey, son, I love you. You should get a snack.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
You get a healthy snack. Your mother's watching, by the way. That was really good of you. Yeah, I will get a healthy snack because I'm going to answer this question. And then you and me, healthy snack. I believe in us. Anyways, long story short, we're there at the Paizo office. We're having a great time. We're having a chat, and a guy walks into the room. I believe I want to say it was James Jacobs. I have no proof of that. It might have been Jason Bowman. Anyway, walks in. He's like, I'm working on this book called Dungeon Denizens Revisited. I'm like, ooh, Dungeon Denizens Revisited. He's like, yeah. What we're trying to do is really Pathfinderize, like some really iconic monsters that are really like Dungeons. I mean, they're Dungeons and Dragons monsters, but they're not owned by Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a really cool idea. It's like, yeah, we're doing a bunch of these. We're going to do Undead Revisited. Let's talk about undead within Pathfinder, like the Paizo version of the vampire.
Jahan is a huge mark for undead. You are speaking his language right now.
I would like to be involved in that retroactively.
I will make this, buddy. So you're not eating chips. I really respect that. Your mother's watching this thing. We'll talk. Your mother's watching the thing. We will. Yeah. Oh, who would watch this, right? Hey, get out of here. Give me 5-10 minutes. I love your entire heart. We're gonna make this happen. Healthy snacks. What a good guy. I like that guy. So
yeah.
Yeah, he's like, oh, so like we're gonna do a bunch of these. We're doing like Undead Revisited. We're like, oh, cool. Here's your setting. Let's talk about liches. Let's talk. You're a good man. He's not gonna have a snack. But there's like Dragons Revisited, where you're like, okay, cool. Let's talk about, here's 10,000 years of history, 40 developed nations, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk like where do blue dragons fit into that, right? Blah, blah, blah. Super cool idea. And he's like, yeah, we're doing Dungeons and Dragons Revisited, and it's all stuff like the Bulette, right? Or AKA the Bullet, I guess. The Rust Monster, right? Where it's like stuff where you're like, these are iconic. Like, it's not the Goblin. It's not, the Cave Troll. We're like, these are pretty iconically Dungeons and Dragons monsters, but they're not owned by Dungeons and Dragons, so, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea. That's such a cool idea. And he's like, yeah, but I just need 2 more authors. As I stare, I'm like, And I look over, it's me and Jason Nelson standing there. He's like, wait a minute. You 2 assholes are freelance writers for us. I'm like, oh, yeah, we are. He's like, and he like looks through, he's like, I need 2 more. I've got the Shambling Mound and the Mimic. And Jason Nelson, God bless his heart, goes, Shambling Mound! I do like, really? Shambling Mound? That was your... I like to do, I'm like, he called it fair and square. Shambling Mound it is. So I then got paid actual money, like real United States dollars, expendable on McDonald's food as well as a variety of other goods and services to just like write Mimic fan fiction. As I'm just like, let me tell you something really cool. I'm like, all right, let's get into the life cycle and like the breeding system of everything. And it was incredible. It was one of the some of the most fun I've ever had to just be like, man, let's just write about mimics. And they're like, yeah, you got it. Like, you can't use any mimic material that like is canon.
Yeah.
From if you find Elminster's Guide to Mimics, you can't use it. I'm like, I assure you, this will be based on nothing but my own fevered imaginings. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. That book came out. One of the developers on there, Sean K. Reynolds, God love him, he contacted me afterwards. He's like, I feel like you had a lot more to say about mimics. I'm like, that's true. He's like, because the article was like 4,000 words. I'm like, I'm on a level with you, bro. I wrote 12,000 words and then just cut it apart. It's like, I somehow really got that. Would you like to publish the rest of your insane fever dream mimic material? And I was like, yes, I would. Very much so, sir. So that book is called Darkness Without Form, Secrets of the Mimic. And it was available from Sean K. Reynolds Games. It's last I looked, like super randomly, I did something online. I was like, unavailable from Drive-Thru RPG? What? So I'm gonna have to figure out how to fix that. I don't know. There's probably a button I need to press. Something I forgot to do. But yeah, that was so that was kind of the beginning of my descent into where you're just like, oh, you'll some people will give you assignments and you write them, and then some people will just be like, what have you done and why am I not stopping you? I'll publish that. And yeah, that's there you go. Yeah, I have strong feelings about mimics.
That's excellent. Yeah, so the reason you knew that they didn't own mimics was because you wrote Pathfinder's mimics. That's hilarious.
In case you were wondering, does Pathfinder have mimics?
So we do have a couple questions from the chat. I'll ask you both of them at the same time for fun. What do you think about game balance, and what was your greatest single moment at the table?
Two fantastic questions. Two great tastes that go great together. Game balance. Okay. A part of me wants to say game balance is a myth. That would be so baller of me to say that, and then like to really be able to back it up and be like, whoa, that guy seems so confident in that.
I've heard a lot of people say it is.
And I want to be that guy. I want to be those guys. Okay, so I think I see the reason a person would say that, which is that the storyteller, fundamentally, at the end of the day, the storyteller decides what can and can't happen, and we're dealing with tropes, right? Like we're dealing with made up stories, but the made up stories have rules, and those have hard and fast acceptable rules that can be known, right? And I have an article I wrote for. There's a book about magic and world building that was done by Kobold Press. With much more famous and interesting and smart people than me, like Wolfgang Bauer, for example, like the Kobold of Kobold Press. But basically on the question of like magic and like the rules of magic. And one of the things I said in my essay, which I'll go back to, is that there's explicable and inexplicable magic, right? And that we come out of a tradition, in the case of Lord of the Rings, of inexplicable magic. I don't know how Gandalf's powers work. Yeah. I don't know what they can and cannot do. They are completely opaque to me. When the Balrog shows up, like if you really read it, not only do I not know if Balrogs have wings, there are, again, people much smarter than me who will have an argument about whether Balrogs have wings. Like, did Tolkien fundamentally mean for them to have wings or not? When it shows up and it like swings at him and he says, "You shall not pass." Like, I get that it happens, but I don't know how. Like, I don't. Yeah. It's like, "You shall not pass." Like the secret fire of Harun. Like, he could have done anything at that point, and like all you as the reader, just like, I'm just along for the ride, right? I'm just glad I'm tall enough to be here. This is a roller coaster. I have no idea what's going on. When he comes back and he's like, "I'm Gandalf the White now," you as a reader, the reviewer, can only be like, "Yeah, I guess you are. I guess you are Gandalf the White now." What? Like, how does... And I get that Tolkien probably, he had an explicable way that magic works for him, but he didn't bother explaining it to me at all. And I accepted that and I was fine. Yeah. The problem is you can't run a game using that. Right?
Yeah.
You can't, and we have accepted up to a point what you would start to call explicable magic. Harry Potter, he is using magic, but when he waves his wand and says "Expecto Patronum," I know what's going to happen next. Like I feel like I do. Like I understand the mechanics of it. Like I'm like, and this, and this. Like it's maybe magic, but it's no more mysterious than Luke presses the button and the lightsaber comes out. Yeah. Like I get that that's how it works. Like I don't know how a lightsaber works, but I get how it works, right? When it's, and even that has inexplicable stuff to it. Like I don't know if they've ever explained why Harry's the boy who lived. Like it's just the death magic, the Avocadabra bounced off his skull.
It was love.
The power of love.
It was the power of love.
It's a curious thing. It makes one man weep and another man. power of love. You're kidding me. It's the power of love.
No,
Really?
I never kid about magic.
I would never. But like, you can't. Magic the Gathering would not work if there was like, how does this card operate? You're like, well, mechanically, it's the power of love, and
It's true.
It prevents you from losing the game. I don't know. You have to look your opponent in the eye and just say, does your mother feel a true mother's love for you? And when they says yes, you're like, I lose.
I don't think you realize this card has a scar on its forehead, and it's the chosen card. It was saved by the power of love last time we played.
Yeah, and you're just. I'm sorry. I literally just got a text from my wife just saying it was Horcruxes. Plausible. Funny enough, I would consider that to be much more explicable because power of love is inexplicable. The moment where, I'll just say this, and because you can get inexplicable. You can just do the like, why did it happen? I don't know. It did. It just happened. That happened in the story. When I was watching Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and the robot turns and was like, bleep blorp. Unfortunately, she's lost the will to live. Like, there's a part of me, I'm like, no, she didn't. No, that's not how. You are a bad doctor and a bad robot.
That's not how it works.
He is a really bad doctor and a bad robot.
He was a really bad doctor. Space doctor that couldn't save someone that was fundamentally fine is not a good doctor.
This is space. You are a robot and a doctor. I know a guy, I don't want to say who it is, but it's her husband who got all of his limbs cut off and is fine now. You have a robot will to live that you can install? Because in real life, I know several people who have lost the will to live. I once watched a man take frozen Twinkies and dip them into vanilla-flavored Crisco and eat them in the dark and wash it down with warm Jack Daniels and chain smoke for like a week. And they had lost the will to live. And you're telling me you, robot doctor, would just be like, bleep blorp? No. Shut up. That could be inexplicable. And then you can have the fan theory where, like, actually, Palpatine stole her life energy to heal Vader. And you're like, oh, that's not a story checks out, right? But you could also just be like, oh, it's a galaxy a long time ago, far, far away. Her husband also didn't realize she was pregnant with twins. I don't know.
On Game Balance, that's you talking about Star Wars has totally reminded me. This has been my opinion on Game Balance for a long time as I grew up watching movies like Star Wars, right? There is no party balance in Star Wars. Whenever a Jedi lightsaber fight breaks out, the Jedi must handle it. They go and fight that fight. Their C-3PO cannot fight a Sith. There is no party balance.
That is my strongest possible agreement. And unless we're going to be like, C-3PO is really a class feature that was obtained by R2-D2? Is he R2-D2's class feature? Where you got high enough level as an astromech droid that
one of them is playable? That's the good question. Who's the PC and who's the add-on?
Yeah. You're like, dude, you're a second level astromech droid, and you just get a free like translation droid because otherwise it's just going to be you beeping and burping your ass across the galaxy far, far away. No, shut up! You're taking the companion droid. I don't know. But yeah, no, but that's an excellent point. Like I remember when they're like, "Here's the Buffy the Vampire Slayer role playing game." You're like, so. It's just Buffy actually at the end of the day because everyone else is useless.
Like, there's an argument to be made for Willow, and Angel was a part of it at one point. And
yes,
I shouldn't get started. Yeah,
I'm about to say until the one season where it's Willow, and then it's Willow the role playing game, and everyone else is useless because how do you play Xander in that? And the answer is no. You have a lot of heart.
No one wants to play Xander.
No, but I'll tell you this. I've run a game. I've run games of this game at Gen Con for Cubicle 7, and this was really cool because at one point I wrote a book, and it was published by Wright Publishing, which was amazing. God love Steve Russell, just right there to him. That's just a good man. And it was printed by a company called Cubicle 7. And Cubicle 7 is a British company.
Yeah.
And at the time, Cubicle 7 had the rights, I guess the licensing rights, the publishing rights, the distribution. I don't know exactly what they had the rights for, but it was for a bunch of BBC stuff.
Yes, they have Doctor Who right now, yeah.
So Doctor Who, the role-playing game, they were we're the publishers, the licensors, the deliverers, that were the people. And they had a thing where they would come to Gen Con, they're British, and they would do this like, hey man, it's literally cheaper for us, a British, I mean, they said there's a British accent, I'm not going to try to do it. But they're like, it's cheaper for us to literally find Americans who live relatively close to Gen Con. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm down the road. They're like, yeah, you can drive your ass to Gen Con. We will put you up in a hotel room. We will buy you a badge, and we will like buy you some meals and like give you a stipend and just be like, oh, you want this like $50 hardcover book? Like, I don't want to ship it back to England, so here it is. Like, it's cheaper for us to do that than to fly people in from England to run games. Like, we're gonna work you like a dog. Like please realize. Some days you're like, and it's 8 a.m. time to run a game until noon, so I can run a game from noon to 4, so I can run a game from 4 to 8, so I can run my last game of the day from 8 to midnight. Yeah. Just 15 hours of 4-hour games back to back.
Sounds like heaven.
It was like, but like to me, like especially at that time, like now I couldn't do it. Now today I just be like, I'd rather die. But at that time in my life where I'm just like, yeah, I'm 28 with no responsibilities. I have nothing to do. I'm going to be at Gen Con anyway. Like, for them to just be like, do you want to just run like 40 hours of games over that weekend and just like have us pay for everything? They're like, what's the catch?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I feel it.
I'm not going to be sleeping. It's Gen Con. But anyway, like, so, you know, there's Doctor Who, the role-playing game. And here's what I'll say. If a game where they're like, okay, one of you gets to be is an incredibly sexy, immortal, psychic Time Lord from outside of reality who has his own TARDIS and the game's named after him. And then you can play a guy named Jeff who works in a small shoe store in London. And to be like, all right, let's take a look at these two sheets. Like, okay. And look, I do really, there are other people. Like, okay, I'm going to play a psychic dinosaur woman from before time. But then you're like, and I'm gonna play Rick, you know, her manager at the coffee shop. And like, the game has, God help them, they figured out how to make it playable and how to make it fun. And you, the storyteller, have to buy into it, and all of your players have to buy into it. But I'm going to tell you this: if you're sitting down to play Doctor Who at Gen Con, you have bought into it. Like, there's nobody there who's like, I'm going to ruin this for everyone. No. And it is a ton of fun. It is very playable. And like one of the tricks to it, just of the thing is, everything costs drama points to activate. So if you want to use your psychic paper or your sonic screwdriver or whatever, you actually want to use it, it costs drama points. And you, as the doctor, start with a deficit of drama points, and you can do nothing. But then you can earn a drama point if you make a roll and succeed, and just are like, I choose that I don't succeed. Congratulations, here's a drama point. So if you're in a sewer and you're like, the GM's like, oh, make a perception roll, and everybody makes it, and you're like, I'm a fucking Time Lord, like, I'm pretty sure I can't fail. But you stop because Ricky is like, oh no, Doc, look out! And you're like, oh no! If you willingly choose to have failed, you get the drama point, and that means Ricky
makes a lot of sense.
He gets to be front and center, and you're just sucking up the drama points because you know at that very, very end of it, you're going to have to pull a negative time wedgie and like just, and that's going to cost 20 drama points, and they're going to be like, oh, Doctor, you saved us again. Like, I couldn't have done it without you, Inspector Ricky.
You sold me on the Doctor Who game. I definitely want to play now.
And if you have players who were into it, we're like, okay, everybody make your dodge roll, and you're like, the doctor makes it effortlessly because he's a master of I don't know how many versions of Kung Fu, But then like the one guy makes it, and he's like, I am just gonna die. Like, get down. And you're like, okay, you get a drama point for having yelled "get down" and flying tackling the Time Lord to help him. And also, Time Lord, you are gonna get for being like oof and like falling to the ground because he saved you. Like, absolutely, it's if you're into the spirit of it, and you're like, no, this does it have game balance? Can it? But it's also the tropes. Like one of the rules for the game is we don't call it combat. It's conflict. When the conflict starts, everybody gets to talk. That's a rule.
I like that.
Everybody gets to do something, and then everybody gets to try to run away. So if the greatest assassin in the universe pulls a gun on you and is about to shoot you, they're literally like, unfortunately, by the laws of physics, he cannot pull the trigger until I have A, given an interesting topic, a rant about pacifism, reached over and pushed the button that closes the doors, and then once the doors are closed, I've chosen to run away. His finger can't squeeze hard enough. It can't. So game balance is important depending on what story you want to tell.
Fair.
I mean, to punt on that one, like, does a wizard need to be able to do as much damage in combat as a fighter?
Does a bard need to do the same damage as a rogue? Do they need comparable health to a barbarian?
That's fair, yeah.
Do they need to be able to stand toe-to-toe? Which one's better at clearing out waves of minions versus doing single target high damage? And is that balanced? If I can kill 20 in the same turn that you can kill one really big thing, those are questions that we could go over these for.
It's okay, Clinton. I like your answer. You're right. It does depend on what you're trying to say. It matters less in a superhero game than it does in a crime drama.
Absolutely. Because when Spider-Man and Daredevil team up, you got to be like, really, Daredevil? Are you really pulling your weight on this one? Tell me one thing Spider-Man can do Daredevil can't. That Daredevil can do that Spider-Man can't. And you're like, well, there's a low degree.
Be blind.
Not in the tights. Right? Like, but they still team up. Right? Like, what story are you going to tell? There's no member of the Incredibles who can do what Jack can do.
That's fair.
Right? The third movie is just going to be just Jack and his, like...
It's going to be called The Incredible.
Yeah, The Incredible. And his parents and older siblings who are also there to be like, great job, Jack.
Clinton, I do have one last question for you. I always like to finish up with this. Are there any tabletop role-playing games that are about to come out that you've been watching? Any indie games or any board games or anything like that you are interested to play? Okay, excellent question.
There is someone out there who has their thumb on the pulse of games. Here's my thumb, far from that pulse. I don't know anything.
You haven't been able to keep up with some of the stuff.
It's sad. I have not actually sat down and gamed in a hot minute. I will guess since last year at this time. I think the last time I ran a game was in August, maybe, and these things are understood. Like, I mean, I know. I don't want to be woe is me. We're like, oh yeah, my life's tough, and you're like, you do have a house. Though.
Yeah.
Like you are wearing clothing in a you were in the middle of a pandemic.
Hey, that's totally something we can remedy if you ever want to. We play games all the time over here, so if you ever want to come on and play a game, we'd love to have you.
I would love that. I would genuinely love that. With a little luck, it seems as though my wife has enjoyed watching this episode, which means that the statistical likelihood of me being like, so honey, I was thinking I would go back on, but rather than just talk about myself and be a weird asshole, in theory, I will also play some games for people that are amusement. And be like, yeah, maybe one of them will buy a copy of something you've written, and I'll be like, yeah, that was my plan all along, to support my family.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Buy a copy of a book with my name on it. Just for me.
Hey, look, you came here to support our family. We can support your family, right?
Your wife says I support this message. So.
See, now that is yeah, number one. Ace number one, baby. But yeah, so yeah, I would love that. I would love that. It's been a hot minute since I've been in a podcast. It's been a hot minute since I have gamed. It's been a hot minute since I've done all sorts of stuff. But you know what? Can I bring you the answer to that one next episode?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been great having you. Hearing about your journey and just where you've come from and all the things you've done. It's inspiring, and it's great to know that there are people like you working behind the scenes in the TTRPG field, people who actually care about inclusion and wokeness and, those kinds of problems. And just, you're a great guy. It was great to meet you.
Thank you for having me. Beyond words, beyond reason, beyond saying.
No, it was great having you. You're a great guest. And so before we go, I'm going to say my thing. He's going to say his thing. Make sure to tell them where they can buy your stuff. Because there are people watching, so maybe you could sell a couple things. But I'm Jahan at RockFact on Twitter, and at Jahan1 on TikTok.
Casualty CDG, and you can find me at Casualty CDG on all the social medias. If you want to see Jahan and I playing tabletop role-playing games and board games, come by every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. Central. We also talk about movies and video games and all sorts of stuff. We have a podcast that comes out every Sunday called Fresh Out the Podcast. That's where all podcasts are available. And Clinton, I just wanted to tell you something before we go. When we work, Jahan and I, as ambassadors for Green Ronin, and we met them last year, and we just loved their community manager, Troy. And what Troy told us after we talked to him was that you guys are the most absolutely fantastic type of insane I've ever met, and I love working with you. And Troy telling me that, the same thing. You are fantastically insane, and I love you, Clinton. Thank you for being here.
That means the absolute world to me. I love Green Ronin. I would advise everyone to pick up, if you're a Pathfinder player. I got to work on the advanced bestiary for Pathfinder from Green Ronin. It's incredible. Now, if you're not a Pathfinder fan, that means nothing. But if you are, I would definitely grab it. Get a copy. If you are a vampire person, if you like Vampire the Masquerade, my highest recommendation. It's a silver seller, so it's people have bought it, and it supports myself and Dr. Joe Weinberg. Esoterica, Twists of Obscenity, Esoterica of the Bali, and then if you just look up Clinton J. Boomer, you're gonna find a bunch of my stuff. I think my novel, The Hole Behind Midnight, I think if you click on it, you should be able to read like the first 5 pages. If you read those and you don't like that book, do not purchase it. I just want to be I tried to get really front load it. My mother's read it 8 times. My father has never. He picked it up and he started and he goes, "Oh, I get it." And I said, "Yeah, please do not." No, if you read the first 5 pages and you're like, "Oh, this seems really good," please do buy it. If you read those and don't like it, don't. Save you, me, and my father just a lot of time. Well, hey, a pleasure. So yeah, that's I think if you Google Clinton J. Boomer, I don't think you can help but find me.
Excellent. So yeah, check out everything that Clinton's doing, and will do. Fantastic. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for watching. Stay fresh out there.